Yes, I think the first thing, we look at our district, there's a lot of underutilized city-owned assets that are there that have not been prioritized for anything. And so you look at Atlanta Housing Authority, they haven't done anything for a long time. Invest Atlanta owns a lot of property, APS owns a lot of property. And so we need to designate some of that for affordable housing in our district. And for so long, there's so many people that have been left out of the progress that's been happening. Progress is good, but you and I both have a problem because both of us lived on the north side of our district. And we've seen what disproportionately that the people on the south side of our district have not been getting the same resources that we've been seeing on the north side of our district. And so there's a lot of mistrust for you and I right now, for either one of us right now. We got to build a coalition and make sure that the people on the south side continue to see us and that we do everything we can to protect the people that make Atlanta what it is and that they continue to be able to afford and stay in a city that has given us the opportunities that we have.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to talk about, a lot of agreement when it comes to that kind of thing. Yeah. And we were definitely at a risk of the negative consequences of an economic boom. We got this prosperity bomb that is already exploding, it's about to explode even further down the Beltline when we get that influx of federal dollars. And we're looking at going beyond just even the $16 million to having literally hundreds of millions of dollars coming down into Georgia, with the infrastructure bill being passed, and potentially even more when we're looking at like a second bill possibly coming down from the federal government. So, I think the people that are most at risk are renters and long-term residents. The renters are at risk because they're always at most at risk because those rents can just rise overnight on them. And so if we don't have enough actual affordable rental units in line, if we're not having Atlanta housing like executing well in Eaglewood Manor, for example, building it in a timely manner, if we don't do something like having an affordable housing trust fund so we can use a stabilization fund to go in and proactively try to acquire naturally affordable housing and renovate it, keep it, maintain it. Because we have Gladstone just down the street from both of us. And we saw that thing, it was in decrepit condition, but it was housing. And we had folks get displaced in the middle of a pandemic when a developer came in, bought it, closed it down, bulldozed it. And you got a homeless camp there right now, folks, and no one from the city is showing up to even help them. So ensuring that we actually have plans in place, that we actually have funding in place in order to be able to deal with the rental issue. And then with the other on the property issue, we need to look at whether we need to bring in some sort of West Side Futures Fund type opportunity to help longtime residents, particularly low-income residents, deal with the upticks in their property values. Because rising property values is great if you're going to be looking to sell your house, but if you want to look to maintain that house, to live in that house, we're going to have legacy grant programs to do home repairs. We're going to have to find out how we can bring in some money in order to be able to help them pay their additional property taxes. Because blanket property tax freezes is not going to work. It's not going to be great from a public policy perspective. We need to be a lot more targeted and a lot more nuanced with our public policy when it comes to deal with that issue.
So the two of you are a bunch of nerds, I can tell, which is great. I think everyone seems to like both of you. Y'all have been in conversation and debate with one another over the course of this race. What differentiates the two of you? Jason, why should we, what's the experience or the understanding that you bring to the table in this moment that we need, maybe just even if it's slightly more, but how does someone differentiate between y'all two as candidates?
Well, I think one of the main things, I'm from Georgia, and I've been in Atlanta for all my adult life. For over 20 years, I've called Atlanta home, and I've transitioned through all the different types of housing that you talk about. I was a renter. My wife and I bought our starter home in the district, but we needed an Invest Atlanta down payment assistance to be able to allow us to even have that home. Then we took that home and we were able to upgrade to a larger home so that we could start a family. And so I've seen all the different changes. I've been through all the struggles that a lot of people are going through right now, and I am so concerned that a lot of people are not going to have the same opportunity that my wife and I had to be able to build generational wealth that home ownership allowed us to have. And so I've seen that struggle. I was displaced. I went to Georgia State University and stayed in off-campus housing. The building that we stayed in was sold mid my semester. Where I had to go couch surf for several months to figure out where I was going to live and how I was going to, pay my tuition. And so I've seen that struggle firsthand. So I know what it's like for so many people that want to come to Atlanta and build the generational dream that we have done. The other side of it is, is my executive experience. I own a marketing consulting business. I teach at Georgia State University. I've been in the room with the philanthropic community, C-suite executives. So I've sat at the table with people that make big deals. I've ran a large nonprofit where I was the chair of that board. I've run a large fundraising unit, which is a festival where I had to deal with permitting and NPU permits and that kind of thing. And so, that's one of the things that differentiates us. I know Nathan is super smart, and he has a wealth of knowledge about so many different policy issues, but, I'll let him speak to that. But, some of the stuff that, I think separates me from him.
So for you, it's your lived experience.
Yeah.
Great. Nathan, Jason spoke to his lived experience, which is compelling. I think that that's very important for people to have folks who represent them who understand what they've been through. Would you say to someone who feels that maybe you don't represent the district or you don't represent those challenges, how would you push back on that, and what other experiences do you bring to the table that people should consider in determining who they're going to vote for?
I mean, I grew up in a working class family. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a janitor. He was a trash collector for the city. He was, for several years, probably the most important job, a stay-at-home dad for me. In a time and an era in which dads weren't allowed to stay home. I mean, the stuff that he heard in our town to be able to do that was crazy, but he did that for me, and that's something I always think about quite a bit. And then I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to go to college. The time I was looking to go to school, my mom was let go as a teacher, and my dad was working at the time as a paraprofessional in the school, and he was let go at the same time. So we were sitting there, I was a senior in high school, trying to figure out how the hell we were going to afford to be able to send me to college. So just kind of knowing what those difficult conversations are like, struggling through that. After I went out to, I spent a couple years in DC working for the federal government. But while doing that, I actually went to graduate school at night because I wanted to ensure that I didn't have debt hanging over my head, and I couldn't afford to be able to go to grad school full time, unless I was working full time. So I did both. I got up at 7 a.m. to go into the office, and I spent from 5 p.m. till 11 p.m. most nights on campus working through that. And when I first got here to the city of Atlanta, we used the Invest Atlanta program for our first apartments. We took advantage of that in order to be able to have an apartment that we could afford. At the time, I was working for the state government, which in Georgia doesn't pay that great. Shocker. And then my wife, my now wife, was a student. So that's how we made that work. And then I think, Jason was talking about his experience working in business. My experience is solely on the other side. It's in the public sector. I've been a public servant my entire adult life. So in the last 7 years, working as a performance auditor for the state of Georgia, where I lead a performance audit and program evaluation unit. On top of that, I've been a neighbor association president for SAN, which is 7 neighborhoods in Southeast Atlanta. I've done that for 3 years. I've done everything from working with our state delegation to bring GDOT to the table so they could deal with all the issues that exist within Moreland Avenue. Working with the Department of Public Works and GDOT in order to get bike infrastructure on Bill Kennedy Way, knowing how to work with developers to figure out how we can get affordable housing to
So it's a lot more public sector experience within the public sector.
Yeah, I think that's what kind of separates the two of us. And I think that's what we both kind of said here. And
got it.
Our daughters are about the same age, so we have to be nice to each other for their sake.
That's right. I wanted to ask any of the other candidates if you have a question for our candidates in District 1. Can you use the mic, please?
I know we're super close in our district, Brown Mill Road, and until they started gerrymandering us, that was District 12. We're real close. And so I got a lot of students who are a part of your district. Do you plan to involve yourselves with the high school, Carver High School or South Atlanta High School in your time as a council person? Because our current council person has only been to the high school one time in 5 years. And so we want involvement.
So it's funny because I know people have been talking about Bankhead to Buckhead, but I've been talking about Buckhead to Brownsmill in my forums because, that's in our district, is Brownsmill. But, one of the things I've done for over 15 years is mentor and coach youth at the Boys and Girls Clubs all throughout District 1. And so I see it being very important to make sure that we continue to invest in our youth, and which is why up until COVID, literally I was in schools talking about, my journey and how I could help shed some light on some different ways that these kids could make it, not necessarily out of their certain situations, but see that there is different opportunities for them. You don't have to shoot a ball or throw a ball to be able to make a living in your life. You can go to school, you can take a trade, you can go to technical school. There's so many different opportunities for kids that they don't see it. And so I think that's what we're missing right now from some of the water boys or whatever the other issues that we see with our youth. They don't know that there's different opportunities for them, you know, that they can start learning skills right now that can prepare them for the rest of their life. And so I will be committed to continuing making sure to tell my story and getting in front of our kids so they know they have a brighter future.
I think this ties in directly with the conversation I was having while out door knocking earlier this afternoon, which is, so Atlanta Public Schools is separate from the city of Atlanta. But how are you going to coordinate and work together? Because at the end of the day, how good our public school system is has a tremendous impact on how great our city is. And what the city does has a tremendous impact on APS. So I think a couple ways in order to really try to deal with that issue is we do need to be present in the schools. If we don't understand what's going on in the schools, how can we as council members figure out how we're going to go and support them from a city perspective? If we don't understand the challenges that are going on there, if we don't understand what sorts of activities are going on, what sorts of youth activities, how can we coordinate the youth activities that Parks and Rec's doing with APS? How can we have real conversations with our APS school board members if we're not taking the time to go in there and involve ourselves? I mean, I think that's just critical if we're going to actually kind of break down the barriers and the walls between us and APS and realize even though we are two separate entities, we just have so much impact on each other every single day.
Can you all give it up for our District 1 representatives? You'll be voting, if you live in District 1, you'll be voting for one of these two individuals.